Imagine planning your dream vacation. But instead of the usual spots, beaches or big European cities, your destination is one of the most, well, enigmatic and isolated places on Earth, North Korea, the DPRK. What would that even look like?
It's hard to picture for most people, isn't it?
Totally. So today we're doing a deep dive into a pretty extraordinary journey. It's the experience of an Indian family, a couple, and their 3-year-old son who actually traveled there. This was back in April 2017.
That's right. And for this deep dive, we're drawing from their own story. They wrote a personal blog post about the whole trip, and they also did a fascinating online Ask Me Anything, an AMA session.
Yeah, answering candid questions from people. So these sources give us a really rare window,
Absolutely. A glimpse into a country that's usually just headlines and mystery.
So our mission here is basically to unpack their trip. We want to explore the realities they found, which were sometimes surprising, but also the incredibly strict rules for tourists. And we get these firsthand insights, all from the perspective of tourists who consciously decided to just observe, to keep politics out of it for their visit.
Which is an interesting angle in itself.
It really is, and it makes you wonder, what actually sparks that desire? Why choose North Korea?
Well, from their account, it wasn't like a whim. It came from a long-standing fascination. They've been following news, reading books, even reading the North Korean newspaper, Rodong Sinmun.
Wow, okay. So pretty deep interest.
Definitely. The husband apparently dreamed of just breathing North Korean air. But the real catalyst, surprisingly, was his wife. She suggested combining a planned trip to Beijing with a visit to Pyongyang.
Huh. So that family curiosity really kicked it off.
Exactly. That's what turned this, long-held fascination into an actual plan.
And what a plan it must have been to execute. I mean, it's not like booking a weekend getaway.
Not at all. They quickly found out there are no direct North Korea tour organizers based in India. So they had to navigate this, well, it sounds like a real communication maze.
How so?
They ended up in 88 email conversations. 88, just back and forth with different travel companies to sort things out.
88 emails. Good grief. My inbox hurts just thinking about that.
Right, and remember, they were traveling with a 3-year-old. That added a whole other layer.
Oh, sure, I bet.
So the travel companies actually suggested an independent tour for them, which sounds flexible, but it was partly recommended so they wouldn't, disturb other travelers on a group tour.
Ah, okay. So even the planning stage hints at that controlled environment.
Precisely. It allowed them a bit more customization, but still very much guided.
So who did they end up going with?
They chose a company called Young Pioneer Tours, YPT. The plan was a 4-day trip, train into Pyongyang, fly back out to Beijing. YPT handled the DPRK visas.
And the family just needed their Chinese visa.
Right, and they had to attend this really important pre-tour meeting in Beijing.
Gotcha. And they planned this all very quietly.
Yeah, 5 months in advance, and very discreetly. They specifically said it was to avoid all the warnings, suggestions, criticisms, and expert opinions from people around them.
You can totally understand that, can't you? Just wanting to avoid all the noise.
Absolutely. And that pre-tour briefing in Beijing, they described it as a key part of the whole North Korea experience.
More than just getting tickets then.
Oh, yeah. It was about setting expectations, what to do, what not to do, really crucial stuff. That's also when they got their actual train tickets and the visas. The original plan was to arrive April 14th and then spend the 15th touring and seeing the celebrations for Kim Il-sung's 105th birthday.
Okay, but things didn't quite go to plan initially, did they?
No, travel rarely does. A taxi got stuck in Beijing traffic and they missed their train to Dandong.
Oh, no. The border city train, that's a rough start for such a big trip.
You bet. But apparently their YPT contact, a guy named John McGovern, was really helpful. He quickly got them rescheduled onto a fast train for the next morning.
Phew, okay. So disaster averted, mostly.
Mostly. It did cut their trip down by a day, but they managed to rearrange things to cover most of what they planned.
So they get to Dandong. What was that like, the first glimpse?
Well, their description is quite evocative. They said Dandong felt cold, windy, and gray, maybe reflecting their own disappointment about the delay.
Yeah, understandable.
But then, standing there, looking across the Yalu River, just a few thousand meters away, there it was, North Korea.
Wow.
And the traveler described these profound questions just bubbling up. What lies beyond this point? What is the truth? What is not the truth? What will be shown to us?
It really captures that mystique, doesn't it? The uncertainty.
Absolutely. And entering the country, they said it felt like time travel.
Time travel? How so?
They arrived on April 15th, 2017, but in North Korea, that was Juche 106. They literally stepped into a different calendar system.
Right, the Juche calendar, starting from Kim Il-sung's birth year. And that day itself was significant.
Hugely significant. His 105th birthday, known as the Day of the Sun, a major public holiday, lots of celebrations.
But the strict reality kicked in fast, right? At the border station.
Immediately. Sinuiju Station. An extremely meticulous customs check. This was like their first real taste of the information control.
What did they have to do?
List all electronics, books, any religious items, art stuff, every bag opened manually, checked, DSLRs scanned. And get this, some passengers apparently had hard drives and memory cards wiped.
Wiped. Right there on the train.
On the train, passenger by passenger, nobody allowed off until it was done. They described the atmosphere as very tensed.
I can only imagine. So even your personal photos or data weren't necessarily private.
Doesn't seem like it. And even after clearing customs, freedom was minimal. On the platform, you couldn't stray more than a few meters from your train coach door.
Seriously, what happened if you did?
The traveler mentioned trying to walk a bit further and just getting a loud "aye" from a guard stopped them right in their tracks.
Wow, okay. And then there was that unusual move with the coach.
Yeah, this was quite specific. Before the train even left Sinuiju, the family, just the three of them, were moved to a different coach, less crowded, right next to the guard's compartment.
Why? Did they find out?
Some fellow Koreans on the train who spoke English suggested it was deliberate, to keep them separate from the regular Korean travelers. A well-planned move, they called it. And apparently this was communicated ahead to their guides waiting in Pyongyang.
So curated and managed right from the border crossing. That tells you a lot about the surveillance, doesn't it?
It really does. Minimal chance for spontaneous interaction. And then the train journey itself, the next 5 hours, the view was apparently very repetitive.
What did they see?
Mostly farms, small villages, people walking or cycling on unpaved roads, and propaganda banners. Lots of banners, even on hilltops.
A stark contrast to what they saw arriving in Pyongyang, I gather.
Oh, completely. Entering the capital, the landscape just shifted dramatically. Suddenly, tarred roads, manicured trees and lawns, and the famous Ryugyong Hotel looming in the backdrop.
So a much more modern, organized feel.
Definitely. The view from their hotel room, 18th floor, showed a distinctly urban skyline. But the question is, was it a genuinely bustling city or more of a, Potemkin village feel?
What did the sources suggest?
Well, the setup points towards a carefully presented image. At the station, they were met by two guides, Mrs. Zhang and Mr. Kim, plus a driver, just for their small family.
2 guides for 3 people.
Yep. And tourists are put up in specific hotels, like the Yanggakdo Hotel, which is on an island.
On an island? Why?
Makes it easier to control movement, presumably. Roaming outside without your guides, strictly prohibited.
So that constant escort system reinforces the curated experience idea. No, just wandering around.
Exactly. It's not free exploration.
Did they get to see any of the Day of the Sun celebrations being there on the 15th?
They did get a glimpse. Tourists weren't invited to the main military parade or the mass dancing events, but they were told they could watch it on TV. But their guides did let them watch the celebratory fireworks later that evening from a bridge over the Taedong River. Which sounds like it was a pretty special moment, actually.
That's something, I guess. And dinner.
Dinner was at the hotel's restaurant, run by KITC, that's the Korean International Travel Company. They said the hospitality was excellent, at its best, and they were really surprised by the great vegetarian food options.
Oh, really? Vegetarian food was good?
Yeah, that was a pleasant surprise for them. Tofu, rice, noodles, lots of vegetables.
Interesting. Okay, so moving on. They plan to visit the DMZ, right? The border with South Korea.
Yes, and before that trip, the guides laid out some very specific, very important rules. Again, highlighting the control over perception.
What kind of rules this time?
No photos of military personnel, no photos of security checkpoints or buildings under construction. Also, interestingly, no photos of people working hard or people wearing not so good clothes.
Wow, that's specific. Controlling the image down to the detail.
Absolutely, and a huge one. Photos of the Kim leaders. They must be complete. Nothing cut out. Full frame. And the big rule. Always, always stick with your guides.
Non-negotiable, basically.
Seems like it. So with those rules echoing in their ears, they set off on the 170-kilometer drive to the DMZ.
What was the drive like?
Long and empty. They described seeing only landscapes, farms, and empty roads. Their tourist van was one of just a few vehicles, mostly other tourist buses or military trucks.
So not much sign of everyday traffic or life.
Not on that route, no. And halfway there, they stopped at this makeshift refreshment stand, but it was set up for tourists only.
Ah, reinforcing that tourist bubble again, kept separate.
Exactly. Then at the DMZ itself, a North Korean army officer gave them a briefing, their perspective on the Korean War, the armistice agreement.
Did they see the actual dividing line?
Yes, the concrete line was visible, but what struck the family as odd and disappointing was that there were no South Korean or U.S. guards visible on the other side that day.
We're disappointing.
Well, it made them wonder if the North Koreans were, quote, up to something. It just felt strange not seeing the other side represented.
I see. And the place itself. Lots of propaganda.
Oh yes, buildings adorned with photos of the leaders, and you could actually buy hand-painted propaganda posters there. A very surreal souvenir shop, I guess.
Definitely surreal. What happened after the DMZ?
They went to Kaesong for lunch, a traditional Korean thali, and visited the Kaesong Koryo Museum.
And the museum. Anything noteworthy there?
Very noteworthy in terms of what it tells us about the narrative control. The museum apparently only covered the early Koryo dynasty. Nothing before, nothing after.
Really? Just that specific slice of history?
Yep, a perfect example of showing visitors only what they want them to see. And the AMA later confirmed this, detours from the approved itinerary. Generally not allowed. Guides stick to the plan.
Right. It's all very tightly scripted. What about the Pyongyang city tour?
That also reinforced the curated feel. They visited a metro station, one of the few accessible to tourists.
What did they observe there?
Locals reading newspapers or books, which they noted was not a common sight compared to other countries where everyone's staring at phones.
Interesting observation. Maybe a reflection of limited internet, or maybe the ideology?
Could be both. And of course,
Right.
murals of Supreme Commander Kim Jong-il watched over everyone. The views from the Juche Tower showed that impressive, very symmetrical Pyongyang skyline, again highlighting meticulous design and, well, control.
Did they see the famous lady traffic controllers?
They did see them, but when they asked to stop the van for a photo,
Let me guess.
no, request denied, gotta keep moving.
Of course, at the Mansudae Grand Monument. The giant statues.
Yes, a key stop. And it's mandatory for visitors to bow before the bronze statues of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. It's seen as a sign of respect. Bringing flowers is appreciated too.
Bowing is mandatory.
That's what their account suggests, yes. A required gesture. And they shared this anecdote. Apparently, a Japanese journalist once asked a child near the statues how much they weighed.
Okay, what did the child say?
The child's reply was apparently very patriotic. The weight of these statues is equal to the weight of all the hearts of Korean people.
Wow. That says a lot about the level of reverence, doesn't it?
It really does. And that imagery, the two leaders, it's just everywhere. On major buildings, people wear badges with their faces, and apparently in every single home as well.
Pervasive. So after a day of guided sightseeing, how does a tourist relax?
Well, dinner was at a Korean hot pot restaurant, then back to the hotel. And the TV experience sounds unique.
How so?
Al Jazeera was showing old news, like rebroadcasts, the local channels, non-stop loops of military parades, socialist patriotic concerts, and films about loving the motherland.
So completely cut off from current outside news.
Totally, a significant part of that isolation bubble.
Internet access. Phones.
The AMA confirmed. No internet for tourists, maybe for journalists, but not regular visitors. The hotel had a post office facility where you could send expensive emails or make pricey phone calls, but no international calls from the room.
And mobile phones.
You could bring them, but no roaming coverage. So effectively useless for outside communication. You are truly disconnected. Which brings us to the departure. And this part sounds, frankly, quite unnerving.
Ooh, what happened?
Their flight, Air Koryo JS-151, was set for 8:30 a.m. They got through immigration smoothly, but then around 7:30 a.m., an announcement. All flights will be delayed due to bad weather.
Okay, flight delays happen,
But the rain apparently cleared up pretty quickly, yet the plane's engines were shut off. And then just silence, no updates for hours.
Hours, that sounds stressful.
Very. There were only 3 flights scheduled that day, not many passengers. It all felt really odd, and they saw their tour guides hanging around the waiting lounge.
Like they were being watched.
Maybe. That was the feeling they got. Then immigration actually stopped processing anyone else waiting to check in.
Okay, now it's getting weird. How long did this go on?
9 hours later, they got some crucial info from a journalist who was also waiting.
What did the journalist say?
That the weather in Beijing, their destination, was perfectly clear. Other flights were landing there normally.
So bad weather wasn't the real reason.
Doesn't seem like it. And that's when, as they put it, bad thoughts started creeping in. Theories about military drills, maybe even attacks or sanctions. Real anxiety set in.
Understandable. What did they do?
They called the Indian embassy, and embassy staff actually came to the airport to see them off.
Wow, okay. So the embassy got involved. Did the flight eventually leave?
Yes, eventually. A full 11 hours after its scheduled departure time.
11 hours. And the official reason was
Still bad weather.
unbelievable. The relief landing in Beijing must have been huge.
Immense. They really emphasized that feeling. And the whole experience clearly stuck with them. The traveler even mentioned having weird dreams afterwards, like trying to classify music into socialist and capitalist genres.
Shows how much it got into their head.
Definitely permeated their thoughts.
So, despite all the control, the weirdness, the departure stress, how did they feel about the trip overall? Did it satisfy their curiosity?
They said it did, to the fullest. They were very aware they only saw what was shown and took photos only where it was allowed.
But they felt there was value in just being there.
Yes, they believed that eyes look beyond, the mind perceives. And that experience one gets only by visiting a place physically. That was the core reason they went.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Did the AMA reveal anything that challenged common stereotypes?
Yeah, a few interesting points came up. Safety, for one. They described the travel as very comfortable and safe, which kind of contrasts with some media portrayals.
Comfortable and safe, even with the restrictions.
Yes. Tourists are, in their words, nicely fed, shown around, but yet feel the sense of restriction. And the hotel wasn't empty, it was flooded with tourists.
So, a functioning, if controlled, tourist scene. What about things like the haircut rules you sometimes hear about?
They said that seemed false. People just followed current trends. And the dress code in Pyongyang, modern and formal. Jeans were fine for tourists, though maybe not for citizens. General advice was just to dress modestly.
Okay. But interaction with locals remained minimal.
Very minimal. They described locals as shy, sometimes even running away if greeted. And guides rarely allowed any detours. That separation was consistent.
What about the economy? What could they glean?
Looked like a mix of agriculture and trade, mostly with China. Shops had local goods like soaps and shampoos, but also Chinese products. But again, the caveat, stores we were shown were meant for tourists only.
Right, that dual system again. How were the guides, personally? Were they just minders?
They described them as quite human. They shared jokes, seemed friendly, but their worldview was clearly limited by the system. The family learned to ask questions they can comfortably
A
answer.
practical strategy.
Yeah, and the food, as we mentioned, was a big positive surprise. Excellent vegetarian stuff.
Did they comment on media portrayals versus their experience?
They did. The traveler felt that quite some things that media shows is over the board, and some things are maybe hoaxes. They stressed they were just tourists wanting to see what was shown, not investigators.
Just observers.
Exactly. And the Juche ideology, that self-reliance principle, clearly deeply ingrained, leaders revered. Officially, guides claimed religious freedom exists, but in practice, no other religions seem to be formally followed.
And the ethical question. Contributing tourist money to the regime.
They addressed that. The traveler felt they had no control over how money is spent, comparing it to paying taxes anywhere. Their advice for potential visitors was quite philosophical.
What was it?
The idea here is not to think a lot. If we think again, we would never go. And their recommended attitude, do not search. That which is stop and see.
Stop and see. That's a powerful takeaway from their perspective.
It really is. So for you, our listener, what does all this mean? This deep dive paints a really complex picture, doesn't it? North Korea, not just as a political headline, but as a place people actually visit, experience, even within those tight constraints.
Yeah, it definitely challenges you to think about how much our views are shaped by, the news cycle versus direct observation, even if that observation is heavily curated.
Exactly. And it brings up that tricky question. How do you balance that human desire for adventure, for seeing things yourself, with the ethical questions about tourism in such a controlled state?
It's a tough one. There's no easy answer there.
Yeah.
This whole journey, it really makes you think, in a world where we're flooded with information, constantly trying to dig for the truth about faraway places, this family story kind of reminds us that sometimes, maybe the most interesting insights come not from finding what you expect, but just from observing what's shown to you, and then reflecting on how you perceive that. It makes you consider, doesn't it, what other truths might be waiting if we just chose to observe with an open mind instead of only looking for proof of what we already believe.